So first of all, I just want to thank everyone for attending the webinar. As you can see from the main screen here, please note the webinar is being recorded. This is the first in a series of webinars that we're going to be hosting specifically around NEC4 contracts and our solution set for managing them in the Oracle Primavera Unifier platform. As this is going to be the first in the series of our NEC4 web series, we're going to start with a few introductions. So we're going to give you a bit of an introduction to who RPC are, the hosts for the whole web series, which is myself and Nathan. We're going to explain what the Oracle Primavera Unifier platform is for those of you that aren't already familiar with it. We're also going to explain what our solution sets are and, of course, the NEC4 solution set that we've built, which we genuinely believe to be the next generation of NEC4 contract management applications, but also how that NEC4 solution set can fit into a broader and a much more connected project control solution if required. Now, remember, this is just the first in the series, so we hope you can join us as we delve deeper in the future episodes, and we're going to be talking around some of the common challenges that organisations face when managing NEC4 or indeed any other contract type. We're going to discuss why we created the NEC4 solution set, and we're going to discuss how we can improve efficiencies and minimise risks and errors. There's hopefully going to be enough time for some questions at the end of the webinar, and we certainly invite people to post their questions up in the chat box during the webinar, and we'll try and answer all of those, or as many of them as we possibly can. And we also want this to be quite engaging from an audience perspective as well. So if during the web series there's something that strikes a chord with you and you want us to cover it in a bit more detail, then please feel free to ask, and we're going to try and accommodate any suggestions that you have into the web series. Lastly, if you do have any questions that you also want to ask offline, or you believe that we can help you, your project, or indeed your organisation, then feel free to email me on the email address that you can now see on your screen, and we'll help you in any way that we can. So RPC, as an introduction to who we are, we're of course a project controls consultancy, but more importantly, we're an Oracle partner. And we've been supporting Oracle in the construction and engineering part of the business, what a lot of you will be familiar with referring to them as Primavera, since around 1992. So we've been doing everything within that Oracle Red Stack, from supplying the software itself to helping the clients get the most from their products. So that could be training people on P6, which we've done since the very beginning. It could be hosting licenses in the cloud. It could be ongoing support and consultancy once that product's been implemented, or it could be building solutions for complex processes in Unifier, such as our own value solution set, or as we're going to cover very specifically today and throughout a lot of this web series, our NEC4 solution set. And we work with a diverse number of clients across virtually every industry sector, as you can see from this next slide. And you can see a few highlights here, a few of the clients that have implemented some of our solution sets that we built, which we'll tell you more about in a moment. So we have the Ministry of Defence there that have actually implemented a number of our solution sets, but particularly around earned value management. Dublin Airport that we've been working with across cost and NEC4 contracts, earned value management, and a number of other bespoke processes, and also East West Rail that are one of our most recent clients for our NEC4 contract management solution. So as a bit of an introduction to your hosts, you've got myself. I'm Chris Woodbridge, and I've been working in project controls for about 11 years. The last 8 of those have been spent dealing specifically around software solutions. So I've worked for Oracle, I worked for Aconex prior to their acquisition, and also Conjact. So I've had quite an extensive experience across a wide array of different organisations and also specialist disciplines in both the public and private sector. So document control, building information modelling, cost management, and change management. And actually I've focused quite predominantly over the last few years around NEC contracts. So and that's actually a real interest of mine personally as well. We've also got Nathan Lambert on the call. Nathan has spent the last 15 years in the design, development, implementation and support for software solutions for, again, a variety of public and private sector organisations, both in the UK but also overseas in places such as the Middle East. And again, Nathan's been involved in quite a wide array of disciplines, assisting companies with project management, document and drawing management, planning, and again, a primary focus in recent years around contract management, specifically NEC4 and FIDIC, actually, just to name a couple. And Nathan's now working with RPC and has brought his knowledge and expertise and is working with our customers to understand the requirements and just turn them into very simple, user-friendly solutions within Primavera Unifier. And of course, that's what we're here to talk about today. We're going to be discussing our NEC4 solution set within Unifier that we've been having a lot of success with. So without further ado, I'll pass you over to Nathan, and I will see everyone at the end of the webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. So yeah, as Chris introduced, my name's Nathan Lambert, and I'm going to be talking about the NEC solution set that we have in Unifier. Today's session is going to be a sort of general introduction to obviously Unifier and sort of the NEC solution set within that, and then the subsequent sessions will be sort of diving a little bit more into the details and sort of looking at specific processes and how they work in Unifier. So if I give you a little bit of an introduction first to what is Unifier. So Unifier can be whatever you want it to be. It can be a contract management tool, it can be a cost management tool, it can be an asset management tool, it can be used for earned value. So the beauty of Unifier is that it is a platform that can be configured to meet your specific business requirements. So it's not the same as buying an off-the-shelf product to deliver a specific need. Unifier can be configured to meet your requirements, and it can be used for a number of different functions, either standalone functions or as part of a bigger sort of solution, combining a number of those functions together. So how does that work? So with Unifier, what you can do is it allows you to define your structure within Unifier. So how you sort of organize contracts or projects. Unifier allows you to set that up within the system. So it's not a case of you only have contracts or you only have projects or whatever's in there out of the box. Unifier will allow you to define that structure and that hierarchy yourself. So you can go in there and you can set up contracts, sitting underneath projects, sitting underneath a program, sitting underneath a portfolio. And Unifier can be configured on a case-by-case basis to adapt to the structure of your organization. And then from within that, it has something called business processes. And again, all of these can be configured within the system. So Unifier comes with some business processes out of the box, but also allows you to configure business processes within the system. So a business process in the context of like NEC could be an early warning or an instruction or a compensation event. So that would be the sort of the title of that business process. Then using the sort of available building blocks that you have within Unifier, then you can start to piece together those building blocks in order to build that business process. So Unifier allows you to create data elements. So a data element could be a text field, it could be a date, it could be a drop-down list of information, it could be a currency amount. So Unifier allows you to go in there and build your own data elements and capture all the information that you want to use on the next step, which would be our forms. So within Unifier, the next step would be within that business process, we can go in there and we can define what forms we would have on that business process. So again, so a simple process here, a program submission under NEC. From here, we could go in and we can define the data elements initially. So that might be the date of submission, it could be a subject, it could be a text area with a summary about the program submission. It could be the planned completion date. So we can go in and we can set up all those data elements, and then we can go in and we can set our forms up within that business process. So under the program submission, we might have a creation form and then a reply form. So on the creation form, we can define what fields we want on there. And then on the reply form, we can define what fields we want on there. So obviously on the reply form, we'd have the reply, we'd have the status in terms of is it accepted or not accepted. If we're not accepting it, what are the reasons for not accepting it. So all of that is configured within Unifier. So then from those forms, what we can do is we can build workflows to manage those. Again, for the program submission, we could create a simple workflow that is a creation, a response to that, and then a final end step. But that can be as complex or simple as you want it to be. So for that program submission, you could in theory do a creation, a reply, a send back for update, and sort of loop around until you get to an acceptance process. So those workflows can be configured to meet any requirements that you have. So from that, bearing in mind, sort of mentioned earlier in terms of our shell structure, what we can do then is now take those business processes that we've built and then deploy them at the levels that we've built. So for instance, at our contract level, we might want to deploy all the NEC business processes. So that could be early warnings, it could be compensation events, instructions. So we can go in and we can configure that in the system to include all the business processes that we want in there. And then at a project level above, again, we can go and define what business processes we include in there. So they could be totally different to what we have at NEC level. So this could be processes to manage our budgets, processes to manage our forecast, etc. We can really cherry pick and configure Unifier to meet our specific requirements. It's not a case of this is what it does and you don't really have any flexibility. It's all configuration within the system. It's not a case of going to a developer who has to go and code that into the system. It's all sort of box ticking and drag and drop workflows and things in order to create those business processes and then deploy those within those hierarchies that we've created. So what Unifier also has is something called a cost sheet. A cost sheet can be deployed at each of our levels. So each contract in the system can have its own cost sheet. Each project could have its own cost sheet. Each portfolio could have its own cost sheet as well. And what this allows us to do is structure our costs in a standardized way between all our contracts, all our projects, our portfolio, etc. So that when we are capturing costs at contract level or a project level, those can be allocated back to the standardized cost sheet. Obviously, standardizing our costs in this way allows us to then roll up costs via our hierarchy. So costs that we're capturing at contract level can then be rolled up to our project cost sheet, which can be rolled up to our program cost sheet, which can be rolled up to our portfolio level. So having that sort of standardized cost sheet across our full sort of hierarchy allows us to really easily push information up and down that hierarchy and automate that as well. Say, for instance, our compensation event process within NEC. As a compensation event gets to the end step, we can allocate the cost to our standardized cost sheet, which can then roll up to the project level above and then to the portfolio, etc. All of the workflows and processes in the system are all permission controlled, so they can define who can see what, who can click on every single sort of form within the system, and it's very sort of manageable. Again, all of that can be configured within the system as well. Another sort of unique thing about Unifier is obviously allowing you to build these business processes and these sort of like functions within that. But as it's an Oracle product, it also has sort of native integration with P6 as well. So it allows you to pull data in from P6, which could obviously be useful for earned value management, for instance, but also on an NEC context, if you wanted to pull data from your P6 schedule into a particular workflow, or you wanted the latest planned completion date from your P6 schedule for your program submission to NEC, again, you can sort of pull that data through, and it just makes life a lot easier. So moving on to the next step. So we spoke about Unifier and what that is. However, at the starting point, when you buy Unifier, obviously it has some of those business processes out of the box, but then NEC contract management and value and things like that, all of those things, great that they can be configured within the system, but someone has still got to go in and do that configuration, set those configurations up within there. And that's sort of where RPC would come into the mix. So RPC, as Chris mentioned, we're a consultancy. And as part of our sort of work with existing clients, we've been able to develop sort of pre-configured solution sets. So rather than taking on Unifier and it being a blank slate, our sort of pre-built solution sets can be brought in to Unifier so that you have a base to start with. So for instance, you could bring in the NEC4 solution set, you could bring in a cost management solution set or an earned value solution set, and just rather than starting from zero, you already have that pre-built configuration. So those can be used as standalones. You might just say, we just want to bring in the NEC4 contract management solution set, or we might want to bring in the cost management or earned value. So all of those can be brought in independently, or you can bring those in together and then have them obviously as part of an integrated solution. With the solution sets as well, those can be configured on top of what's in their standard. So say, for instance, the NEC4 solution set, obviously that will contain all the sort of relevant workflows and processes that you have in NEC4. However, all of those can be configured as well. So say, for instance, you wanted to capture additional metadata in any of your forms, you can do so. If you wanted to adjust the workflow, so you might want to put in like additional levels of approval for the acceptance of a payment, for instance, or a approval of a quotation. So if you want to incorporate multiple levels of approvals in those workflows, again, all that can be sort of configured within the system via a configuration. But these solution sets really give like a fantastic head start in that you've already got a base to work from that then you can then configure. You can bring in additional processes, you can tweak the ones that are in there, but it really gives you that head start in terms of using Unifier. So why did we build like an NEC4 solution set? I'll give you a little bit of story in terms of like how the NEC4 solution set came about. One of our existing clients was using Unifier for managing costs, and they were managing those costs at a project level. So in terms of like a project level, they had all their internal sort of change management. So they had internal variation orders, they had sort of budget approvals, contingencies, etc. And they had sort of like this really good internal change management process for managing change to costs at a project level. They're also using a contract management tool, a separate contract management tool to manage their contracts. And obviously that works in silo. Both fantastic systems and both delivering what they needed them to do. However, when it came to obviously approving changes at the project level and then feeding that back into their contract management system, that was a manual process. So they were taking information from the contract management tool, then managing an internal variation order process in order to get that change approved within Unifier. Obviously, moving the amounts into the appropriate columns within their project cost sheet, and then having to again manually take that approval from Unifier and go in and approve it in their contract management tool. So both systems were working great, but they weren't talking to each other. So they spoke to us and said, would it be possible then to have the contract management workflows that they have currently and have those processes align so the information could flow between the two. So that sort of became the foundation of our NEC solution set. So what we were able to do is within Unifier, we went in and we configured a solution set within Unifier that contained obviously all the NEC workflows. So early warnings, compensation events, instructions. So all those processes that you would use to manage an NEC. But now the beauty of what the solution set does is that will now automatically feed in to their existing cost management functionality at a project level. So if I give you a scenario here, a compensation event is notified on their contract within Unifier. That can then trigger their variation order process at a project level. They can go through the appropriate steps within the project level to get that approved. That can then send a trigger back to the compensation process at the contract level to say, right, we've got the amount approved now in our project budget. You can go in and now accept that quotation and implement that CE. And it all sort of ties together. So say, for instance, the quotation, it restricts it so that you wouldn't be able to approve a quotation unless you have the appropriate sort of budget approval at project level. And obviously, because it's all sort of sitting within the one system, that then feeds into like your NEC response times. So again, once that's submitted, the clock starts ticking. And obviously, if you're using separate systems, that would be a manual process that you wouldn't highlighting to you that the clock is ticking at the project level. Whereas because it's aligned within Unifier, your internal processes in terms of like budget approvals, etc. as well, they're using the same sort of timescales. So it's all sort of flowing together and ensuring that efficiencies between levels, because obviously it's all sitting in one system now. And obviously it takes that double handling of data away, because someone's not manually entering information from one system to another. It's not sort of wasting someone's time in terms of like manually having to do that, because it's just gonna flow through there as well. So that was sort of like the reason why we built that NEC solution set. It was a specific need for one of our clients in order to be able to manage those contracts within the same platform as their cost management functionality. So in terms of like the NEC solution set, what does it include? So there's a couple of screenshots that you can see here. So all of these are from sort of different pages within the site. So like I say, we will be looking at these processes in a lot more detail and actually going through some work examples, but I'm not going to overload you with information today. So I'll just give you like a high level overview of what some of these things are. So you can see down the left hand side here, we have our sort of navigation. So all of these are the workflows that are available at NEC level. So you can see we've got early warnings, instructions, compensation events, notifications, program, etc. So all of those are existing at our contract level. And then if you were to look at project level within the system, you'd see a different set of navigation there. So all of those business processes, you can define which level they appear in. So the example we gave previously at project level, they have their budget management, internal variation processes, etc. as well. So depending on what level you are in the system, the navigation and what is available to you will be specific to what's been configured in the system. You can see we've got our dashboard in the middle of the screen here. So a dashboard, again, it can pull information from the various processes within the system. Again, all of this can be configured. So we have a standard NEC dashboard that we have, but all of that can be configured within the system as well. So if the data is within there, you can generally do like a chart, a graph. You can show that in table formats, and obviously, if you bring in any new business processes, so say for instance you wanted to bring in a new process for disputes, or you wanted to bring in a new process for a performance improvement plan, so not necessarily like NEC processes, but if you want to bring those in, again, all of those can be configured in the system, and that data then available to you for your dashboards and reports. And again, it's not something a developer will need to go in and configure for you. Once that's configured in the system, you can go in there and configure those yourselves within the system. The screenshot at the bottom there, the sort of little spiders web we're seeing, is a visual representation of all the contract communications that have been notified on this particular contract. So you can see on the right hand side there, you can see the list of the communications. But I think as a visual, it's a lot nicer to look at that in terms of the spider's web. And you can see the little plus and minus icons against each notification there as well. So you can keep expanding those notifications out to build up that spider's web. So you can see how every single communication is connected to each other within that contract. And obviously you can view it as a nice visual representation as well, and expand or hide any of the notifications as you want. And obviously that can all be exported in terms of like printed out, etc. as well. So in the top right hand corner here, you can see our cost sheet. So again, this is at our contract level. So what this allows us to do is, because we can have a standardized cost sheet at our contract level, we can, when we import our contract level costs, so when we import them initially in terms of an activity schedule or bill of quantities at the start of the contract, we can then go and allocate those costs from the activity schedule and bill of quantities back to the appropriate category in our CBS. So every single item in terms of cost that is brought into the contract is then connected back to the appropriate CBS item in our cost sheet. And as I said, because we've got a standardized version of this between our hierarchies, once you allocate the cost at a contract level, that is going to flow up to the project level above, and then that can flow up to the portfolio level. So as soon as you import those costs in at a contract level, it's going to flow up our hierarchy there. And you can see it's obviously a little bit smaller, but the other columns as well, this will then display to us our sort of compensation events and payments as well. So any changes to this cost sheet can't be done manually. You can't go in there and just go in and just change the data in there. All those costs within the cost sheet are all workflow driven. So bringing the initial costs via obviously our initial financial breakdown, activity schedule, bill of quantities, and then when a compensation event is implemented via a quotation or a project manager assessment, again, all those costs get allocated back to that contract cost sheet. So because it's being allocated back to our contract cost sheet, again, it's going to flow up to our project cost sheet. So as we go through our NEC workflows in terms of CEs, etc., that cost information is going to update our contract level and then update the levels above as well. So all that will line up between your contracts and then obviously your portfolio at the top level. It also has payments on there as well. So when you're submitting a payment application or certified payments, again, all of those will be done against the costed items within the system. So again, as soon as you certify a payment in the system, it'll automatically feed all the information in from the payment certificate back to our contract level cost sheet. And I sound like a broken record here, but then it'll flow up to our project level, etc., as well. And then in the bottom right hand corner here, you can see I've just got an example of one of the forms within the system. So an early warning form here. This will then like I say, all of the forms have been pre-configured within the platform, obviously to manage all the NEC workflows. But again, these can be configured accordingly. So you can go in and add in additional fields. You can go in and change the workflows. You can add in additional forms, additional processes, etc. as well. And then using that NEC as a base. Because Unifier can be configured, you can use the NEC as a foundation and retain that sort of contract structure. But then what it allows you to do is then add in fitted contracts or bespoke contracts, and all of that can be configured within the system. So you can then cherry pick the NEC workflows, or we can configure custom workflows. So again, sort of using that NEC solution as a starting point, it just gives you a lot of scope to expand and fulfill any sort of requirement in terms of any different contract types that you might have. And then in terms of how that might fit into sort of an integrated solution, you can see on my screen here, you can see sort of Oracle sitting within the middle here. And then you can see sort of how this then might connect together. So you can see the light blue elements here would be our contract management functionality sitting within Unifier. You can see the orange the orange items here are our cost management. We can see the blue items here, earn value. We can see the red is sort of schedule resource management within P6. And you can see all this is sort of being combined together within Unifier. because these are sort of can be used as standalones, you don't have to have this full environment. So you could say we just want the contract management, or we just want the integration with P6, or we just want earned value, or we just want cost management, or you could start off with all of that. So it just gives you loads of flexibility, and then any other requirements that you might have. So rather than sort of buying another purpose-built system to do that, again, you can configure in most scenarios, you can configure that within Unifier. So you can just start bringing in more and more processes within that Unifier platform. Like I say, the subsequent sessions will be running, will be more sort of diving into the details and looking at specific workflows. So looking how that cost sheet works, or looking how that spider's web works, or looking how that information flows. But today was just to give you like a little bit of an introduction to that, and sort of like how Unifier works and how NEC4 fits within that Unifier platform. So I'll pass back over to Chris now.
Thank you, Nathan. I think this is probably the perfect opportunity to start looking at some of the questions that we've got before I finish things up. So, Wendy, thanks for posting those questions. Nathan, obviously, you'll need to stay on with us for these questions as well from a technical perspective. I guess what if any difference is there between P6 and OPC over to Unifier? Both easily connect via the gateway. So fairly interchangeable on that fact. Of course, there are some different functions within OPC to P6 and vice versa. So obviously we'd need to look at some of the specific requirements that you might have, but with regards to connectivity, very simple and straightforward. I'm keen to try and keep things as focused on NEC4 as possible for this, but what I might do, Wendy, if you've got a real specific interest with regards to the data that can come out of OPC and into Unifier. And actually, Nathan, if you go back to the previous screen here, you can see where P6 plugs in on the left-hand side there. Essentially, what we could do is we could plug in the OPC element into that via gateway, and we could start looking at some of the portfolio management functionality as well, and how we then connect that into Unifier. So Nathan, I don't know whether there's anything else you want to add on to that at the moment, but obviously, Wendy, we can touch base offline to go into a bit more detail and understand whether there's some specific requirements that you have that particularly interest you. Nathan, anything else to add?
Nothing specific. Yeah, happy to answer any of the questions that anyone's got though in terms of like Unifier or NEC. Apologies, I did go on a little bit longer than I was expecting, but yeah, happy to stay on and answer any questions you've got.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us. Of course, this is just the first in a series of NEC4 sessions that we're going to be holding. So I hope we hope to see you at some of the future events in this series. Anyone that's obviously attended today will get an automatic invitation to the next one in the series. As soon as that date gets released, we'll ping that out so you get an invitation to that. As you can see, the next in the series is going to be really delving into the detail of NEC4 and the Unifier cost sheet. So how the solution automatically updates the cost sheet via NEC workflows, how we can roll that information up to any level. So not just managing costs at a contract level, but project, program, and portfolio. We're going to discuss the NEC4 notification spiders web, which you may have spotted on one of Nathan's earlier screens there. Now, I know that's quite vague, but you'll find out more about that at that specific session that we hold. We're going to be covering some of the tailor-made NEC4 solutions that we've built as well around some of the specific requirements that our clients have had. And of course, we're also going to be discussing beyond NEC4 as well. So again, if there's any questions anyone wants to ask offline, my email is on the screen. Please feel free to drop me any questions, any queries, and I'll catch up with you individually. And we look forward to seeing you at the next session. Thank you very much for attending.